The ego is a concept used in various fields, particularly psychology and philosophy, to describe a part of an individual's psyche or self-awareness. In different contexts, the term may have varying interpretations, but it generally refers to the aspect of the self that involves self-identity, self-esteem, and the way an individual perceives and interacts with the world. Here are some common ways the ego is understood. The instinctual unconscious part of the mind driven by primal urges and desires, pleasure principle. Superego, the moralizing and judgmental part that holds the values and ideals taught by society and caregivers. Ego, the rational, conscious part that mediates between the desires of the ID, the constraints of the superego, and the demands of reality, reality principle. It helps individuals make decisions, act pragmatically, and maintain a sense of personal identity. The ego, in this sense, is often associated with an individual's sense of self, managing both inner desires and external demands. Psychological and philosophical view. In broader psychological and philosophical terms, the ego refers to the individual's sense of self or identity. It represents the way a person understands who they are and how they relate to others and the world. Healthy ego, a balanced sense of self, where an individual has self-esteem, self-awareness, and a sense of purpose, but does not become overly self-centered or arrogant. Inflated ego, a distorted or exaggerated sense of self, often leading to narcissism, arrogance, or a lack of empathy toward others. Ego dissolution. In spiritual or meditative contexts, ego dissolution refers to a loss of self-centered awareness, often sought in practices like mindfulness, meditation, or certain psychedelic experiences where the boundaries between the self and the world seem to blur. Ego in spiritual and religious contexts. Many spiritual traditions, especially in Eastern philosophies like Buddhism and Hinduism, regard the ego as the source of suffering and illusion. The ego is seen as the false sense of self that is attached to material things, desires, and personal identity. Enlightenment or spiritual liberation often involves transcending or dissolving the ego, leading to a greater sense of unity with the universe and an awareness of interconnectedness. Everyday use. In casual language, people often talk about someone having a big ego or being egotistical to describe individuals who are overly focused on themselves, prideful, or self-important. In this usage, the ego is seen as something that can cause negative behavior, such as arrogance, selfishness, or a lack of consideration for others. It's about becoming one with your ego without killing it. It is about achieving a harmonious relationship with it rather than suppressing or completely eliminating it. Here's how you can approach this. Recognize its function. The ego helps you navigate the world, make decisions, and form a sense of individuality. It can give you direction, purpose, and the ability to interact with others. Avoid demonizing the ego. The ego is not inherently bad. It's the excessive attachment to it or a distorted sense of identity that causes problems. Understand that the ego serves a necessary purpose in the human experience. Observe your thoughts. Take time to reflect on your thoughts and feelings. Notice when your ego is at the forefront, whether it's trying to prove something, seek validation, or protect itself. Mindfulness, being present and aware of your emotions, helps you separate your true self from the ego's reactions. Meditation and mindful reflection allow you to see when the ego is influencing you in unhealthy ways. Love yourself unconditionally. Recognize that your ego is part of you and be kind to yourself. Self-compassion helps you approach your ego without judgment, making it easier to accept it as part of your wholeness. Forgive yourself. When you make mistakes, don't let the ego shame you. Allow room for growth and understand that errors are part of the human experience. Acknowledge hidden parts of yourself. The shadow is a concept from Jungian psychology that refers to the parts of your psyche that are repressed or denied, often tied to the ego. Instead of suppressing these darker aspects of yourself, try to understand them. Integrating them can make you more whole and less at odds with your ego. Self-acceptance. Accepting both your strengths and weaknesses creates a balanced relationship with your ego. It's about accepting your imperfections, which in turn lessens the need for your ego to overcompensate or defend itself. Realize you are not the ego. You are more than just your thoughts, desires, or fears. Recognize that the ego is only a part of the larger whole of who you are. This realization helps you separate your true essence from the fleeting desires or roles your ego plays. Healthy detachment. Detach from the need to identify too strongly with labels, titles, or status. You can acknowledge the ego's preferences without being ruled by them. Challenge your need for validation. One of the ego's primary functions is seeking recognition and validation from others. Practice humility by letting go of the need for constant approval. This helps reduce the power the ego has over your sense of worth. Serve others. By helping others and focusing on the collective rather than solely on your own desires, you can balance the ego's need for control and self-centeredness. Connection with the present moment. Whether through prayer, meditation, or contemplation, spiritual practices can help you transcend the ego's limitations by helping you connect with something larger than yourself, such as universal love, compassion, or consciousness. Awareness of impermanence, recognizing that everything is temporary, can help diminish the ego's grip on your identity. Life, relationships, and even your sense of self are constantly changing. Use the ego's power for good. Rather than suppressing your ego, use its energy in a positive way. Focus it on self-improvement, creating art, helping others, or pursuing your goals with compassion and humility. The ego can be a source of motivation when aligned with a greater purpose. Be true to yourself. The more authentic you are, the less the ego feels the need to build false identities. Let your true nature shine through, free from the masks the ego might create. Authentic expression. Express yourself honestly without the need for approval or validation from others. This diminishes the ego's desire for recognition. Release the need for control. The ego often thrives on controlling outcomes and situations. Learn to let go of attachments to specific results. By practicing non-attachment, you release the ego's need to dominate your life. Surrender to life's flow. Trust in the process of life. Instead of trying to force things according to the ego's desires, learn to surrender to the flow of life.